My name is Claire Clatterbuck. I'm 30 years old. On October 19th, at my own engagement party, my mother grabbed the microphone right in the middle of the toasts. In front of 86 guests, she smiled sweetly and said, "Claire dropped out of medical school because she couldn't handle the pressure. And honestly, she couldn't even keep her first marriage together." A nervous ripple of laughter moved through the room. My father started to rise from his chair, ready to add his usual polished version of events about my fragile constitution. But my fiancé, Evan, rose slowly to his feet first. He looked my mother dead in the eyes. His voice was calm, sharp as a blade. "Mrs. Clatterbuck, before you keep going, would you like to tell everyone why you really pulled Claire out of medical school? Or should I do it for you?" My mother's champagne glass slipped from her fingers. Crystal shattered on marble. The entire room went completely silent. They thought they knew my story. They were wrong. I grew up in Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania. If you know the main line, you know what that means. Old money neighborhoods, tree-lined streets, country club memberships passed down like heirlooms. My parents held their membership at a private club where you didn't just play tennis, you performed respectability. In our world, what people thought of you wasn't secondary to who you were. It was who you were. My mother, Diane, was a hospital administrator. Smart, polished, terrifyingly efficient. She could walk into any room and assess its power dynamics within 30 seconds. She earned around $180,000 a year, but you'd never know it from how carefully she managed appearances. Every dinner party we hosted, 12 to 16 guests on average, was choreographed like a stage production. The right wine, the right conversation, the right blend of self-deprecation and subtle achievement. My father, Lawrence, was vice president of financial operations at a regional pharmaceutical company called Penridge Therapeutics. He wore expensive suits and talked about market positioning and strategic growth initiatives. He was always performing too. We all were. I went to private school. Tuition, $32,000 a year. I did well enough to sustain the family narrative. The narrative was simple. The Clatterbucks were successful, stable, respectable. We had difficulties, yes, but we handled them with grace. We didn't air our problems. We solved them quietly and moved on. When I got into Penn's Perelman School of Medicine in April 2017, one of 150 students accepted that year, my mother cried. Not from pure joy. From relief. She'd spent 22 years investing in this moment. Her daughter, the future doctor. The ultimate social proof. I remember her at the acceptance dinner, standing with her wine glass, looking around at the assembled family friends. To Claire, who worked so hard, who never gave up. I saw it in her face, that flash of triumph, like she'd won something. She had no idea how quickly she'd cash it out. Medical school was hard. Everyone says that. Until you're inside it, you don't fully understand. First year is like trying to drink from a fire hose, anatomy, physiology, biochemistry, all simultaneously. I studied in the biomedical library until they kicked us out at midnight. My study group of 5 met every Tuesday and Thursday. We'd quiz each other on muscle origins and insertions until the words stopped meaning anything. My anatomy lab partner was Sophie Brennan, sharp, funny, from New Jersey. We'd stand over our cadaver and try to locate the recurrent laryngeal nerve without cutting it. Those hours in the lab were oddly peaceful. Just us and the work. No performance required. I commuted from home to Penn Med's campus in West Philadelphia. 35 minutes on the Scepter Regional Rail if I caught the express. I'd read on the train, review notes, articles, whatever was due that week. The rhythm of it felt purposeful. Right. My first-year GPA was 3.76. Top 25% of my class. Not the very top, but solid. Strong. I wasn't drowning. I was thriving. When I started second year in August 2018, I felt confident. My parents loved mentioning Penn at dinner parties. My mother would casually drop it. "Oh, Claire's in her second year at Penn, doing very well. The pride in her voice was unmistakable. What she didn't mention was that by late November, something had shifted at home. My father started coming home early. 3 days in a row that first week of December. In our family, you didn't leave work early. Early departures meant weakness, or worse, trouble. I asked him about it once. "Is everything okay at work, Dad?" He smiled. "Just some year-end reorganization. Nothing to worry about." But I noticed the way he said it. Too casual. Too quick. On December 18th, my mother canceled our annual holiday open house. We always had it. 45 to 50 guests, catered hors d'oeuvres, the house decorated like something out of a magazine. She sent a cancellation email 1 week before. Subject line: postponing this year's gathering. Reason given: your father isn't feeling well. That wasn't like her. Diane Clatterbuck didn't cancel social obligations for minor illness. She appeared at events with migraines, with stomach bugs, with whatever was happening beneath the surface. Appearances always outweighed comfort. I can pinpoint the exact moment the cracks started showing. December 2018. My father coming home early 3 days in a row. My mother, who never showed nerves, checking her phone obsessively throughout dinner. January 8, 2019. My mother called me into the library at 7:30 in the evening. I'd just gotten back from campus. Exhausted. We'd had a practical exam that morning on cardiovascular pathology, and I was planning to make tea and review notes before bed. "Claire, sit down," she said. Her voice had that surgical precision she used when delivering bad news to hospital staff. I sat. Financial documents were spread across the mahogany table. Not medical charts or hospital reports. These had my father's company letterhead. "Your father's company is going through a restructuring. He's been placed on administrative leave while they sort through some irregularities." Irregularities. Financial discrepancies. An internal audit. It's complicated. She folded her hands. "The point is, we're facing a temporary financial emergency. We need you home." My stomach dropped. What kind of emergency? The kind where we need to be strategic about resources. She slid a paper across to me. It was a form from Penn's Student Affairs Office. Voluntary medical leave. You want me to take a leave from medical school? Just for 1 semester, maybe 2. Until things stabilize. Mom, I'm in the middle of 2nd year. If I leave now, you'll come back, she said firmly. This is temporary. But right now, we need you to help the family get through a difficult period. I looked at my father. He'd been standing by the doorway, silent. Dad, your mother's right. We need to make some adjustments. What about tuition? I've already paid for spring semester. We have $127,000 left in your education fund. She said it matter-of-factly. Your 529 account. We'll need to redirect that temporarily for legal expenses. Until your father's situation is resolved. Legal expenses? Corporate lawyers aren't cheap, Claire. I stared at them both. This was insane. I was doing well at Penn. I had a path, a future. They wanted me to just stop. How long? A semester, maybe 2. We'll reassess. Can I defer instead? Medical leave is cleaner. I've already spoken with the Associate Dean's office. They're expecting your request. That last sentence stopped me cold. She'd already spoken to them. Before talking to me. But she was my mother. She'd raised me. She knew me better than anyone. If she said this was necessary, if she said it was temporary. I signed the form on January 15, 2019. The reason I wrote, family health emergency requiring caregiver presence. That's what I thought I was doing. Being a caregiver. Helping my family through a crisis. I didn't read the form carefully enough. I didn't ask what my mother had already written to Penn. I just trusted her. That was my first mistake. I started working on January 28th, clinical research coordinator at a biotechnology company in King of Prussia. $52,000 a year. Not medical school, but healthcare adjacent. I told myself it was a detour, not a dead end. My mother withdrew the education fund on February 14th. Valentine's Day. $127,000, transferred to something called the Clatterbuck Family Trust. Legal expenses. I didn't see that line item until years later. My father settled his situation with Penridge Therapeutics in September 2019. Early retirement, we told people. Clean, dignified, final. What we didn't tell people was that he'd agreed to repay $865,000. $250,000 immediately, liquidated from his 401k and our family investment portfolio. The remaining $615,000, $17,083 a month for 36 months. My $52,000 salary helped cover part of that. I lived at home. I didn't ask questions about where my paycheck was going. I just worked, came home, and tried not to think about Penn. But other people were thinking about it. In March 2019, at a neighbor's garden party, I overheard my mother talking to one of her friends. Claire needed a break. Medical school is very demanding. Needed a break? That wasn't what she'd told me. She'd said temporary emergency. Strategic resource management. Not needed a break. By May, the story had shifted again. Medical school wasn't the right fit for Claire, I heard her tell someone at the club. I confronted her that night. Why are you telling people it wasn't the right fit? Because it's easier than explaining the whole situation. People don't need to know our private business. But it makes it sound like I couldn't handle it. Claire, you're being sensitive. I'm protecting our privacy. That word, sensitive. She'd used it before. But now it landed differently. Like an indictment. In July, Sophie called. My anatomy lab partner from Penn. Hey, I ran into your mom at a healthcare conference. She mentioned you'd had some burnout issues. My blood went cold. Burnout. That's what she said. That medical school was overwhelming and you needed time to recover. Are you okay? I wasn't okay. But I didn't know how to explain that the story my mother was telling wasn't the story I'd lived. I'm fine. Just family stuff. I'll be back soon. But I wouldn't be back. And somewhere deep down, I was starting to realize it. By fall 2019, even I started to wonder. Maybe I really hadn't been strong enough. Maybe they were right. Maybe I'd been struggling at Penn without recognizing it, and my mother, trained administrator, expert problem solver, had seen what I couldn't. When you hear the same lie enough times, it starts to sound like truth. In November 2019, my mother introduced me to Grant Hollowell. He's an investment advisor at UBS. 33, from a very good family. I think you two would get along. We met at a hospital fundraiser. Grant was handsome in that clean-cut mainline way. Pressed khakis, blue blazer, firm handshake. He seemed kind, stable, the kind of person who had everything figured out. We started dating in December. Every Sunday, dinner with my parents. My mother would ask Grant about our plans, our trajectory, our progress. It felt less like casual interest and more like oversight. Grant proposed in May 2020. When he asked, I said yes, because it felt like the logical next step, because I was 25 and directionless, because my mother cried when we told her and I knew what those tears meant. Relief. Again. We married on June 13, 2020. Small wedding, 38 guests. We used pandemic restrictions as the explanation, but honestly, I didn't have many friends left to invite. Most of my college circle had drifted away. My Penn friends had moved on. I'd become someone whose life had narrowed to work, home, and the slow erosion of whoever I used to be. The red flags started small. Grant would reference things my mother had told him. Your mom mentioned you get anxious about big decisions. Or, your mother said you've been through a lot. I want to make sure you're not taking on too much. Taking on too much. Anxious about big decisions. These weren't things I'd said about myself. These were my mother's words, filtered through Grant's concern. In October 2020, I mentioned wanting to apply to MPH programs part-time. A way back into healthcare, even if not medical school. Grant hesitated. Maybe wait a year. Let things settle. Things are settled, I said. Your mother thinks you might be pushing yourself too hard again. Again. That word hung in the air. What do you mean, again? You know, like before. At Penn. What did she tell you about Penn? That you had some challenges. That medical school was really hard on you. 18 months into our marriage, during an argument about my career, Grant said something that stopped me completely. Your mother warned me you'd try to do too much again. She said you don't always recognize your own limits. What exactly did my mother tell you about me? The conversation that followed was the beginning of the end. Grant didn't want to discuss it at first. He kept saying he didn't want to violate my mother's confidence, which was absurd. She had been talking about me. Not to me. Finally, he admitted it. She said you had a breakdown at Penn. That you couldn't handle the medical school stress. That you needed someone stable in your life to help keep you grounded. She asked me to be patient with you. To understand that you might need extra support. The kitchen of our Bryn Mawr apartment went very quiet. A breakdown. That's what she'd told him. I called my mother that night. September 18, 2021. The call lasted 43 minutes. Did you tell Grant I had a breakdown? Claire, you're overreacting. Did you? A pause. I told him you went through a difficult time. Which is true. You told him I couldn't handle medical school. You told him I was unstable. I never used that word. But that's what you meant. That's what you wanted him to believe. I was protecting you, she said, her voice hardening. You were fragile, Claire. You needed someone stable. I did what any mother would do. You lied about me to my husband before I even married him. I gave him context so he could support you properly. He doesn't support me, Mom. He manages me like I'm a project that needs handling. Because you don't always see what's best for you. You never have. Medical school was too much. I knew it. I pulled you out before you completely fell apart. And I made sure Grant understood what he was getting into. I hung up. That's when I knew. She believed her own lie. She'd rewritten the history so thoroughly in her own mind that she could no longer see the difference between what actually happened and what she'd decided had happened. And if she'd lied to Grant about me, what else had she told, to whom, and in what form? I moved out in October 2021. Filed for separation on October 28th. Grant didn't fight it. The divorce was finalized by April 2022. I don't blame you for believing her, I told him when I left. I blame her for making you believe it. In June 2022, I was sorting through divorce paperwork. Tax documents, mostly forms Grant and I had filed jointly that needed to be separated out. Schedule A. Itemized deductions. Line 43. Education fund withdrawal penalty. $127,000. Date. February 14, 2019. I'd known about the withdrawal. What I hadn't known was the destination. The notation in the margin, Clatterbuck Family Trust, legal expenses. Not medical emergency. Not family health crisis. Legal expenses. I sat on my friend Emily's couch and stared at that line for 20 minutes. Then I called Penn. Student Affairs, this is Karen speaking. Hi, my name is Claire Clatterbuck. I was a student at Perelman School of Medicine. I took a medical leave in January 2019, and I need to request my complete file. All correspondence related to my withdrawal. It took 13 days. The email arrived on July 28, 2022. Subject: Records Request. C. Clatterbuck. 11 attachments. I opened them sitting in my car outside the biotech company where I still worked. I couldn't wait until I got home. The voluntary medical leave form was first. I recognized my signature. The reason I had written, family health emergency requiring caregiver presence. But underneath, in the official processing notes, someone had added, student requesting mental health support during leave period. I never requested mental health support. I never wrote those words. I scrolled to the next document. Email correspondence from my mother to Associate Dean Patterson. Sent January 12, 2019. 3 days before she made me sign the form. Subject: Confidential, Claire Clatterbuck medical leave request. I read it twice. Then a third time. Dear Associate Dean Patterson, I am writing regarding my daughter Claire Clatterbuck, currently in her 2nd year. Claire has been experiencing significant anxiety and stress adaptation issues related to the academic demands of medical school. Our family is seeking appropriate mental health support for her during this time. We respectfully request accommodation for voluntary medical leave, effective immediately. We appreciate your discretion in this sensitive matter. Sincerely, Diane Clatterbuck. Anxiety and stress adaptation issues. Mental health support. Our family is seeking, not Claire is seeking. Our family. She'd made it sound like I was falling apart. Like I was the one who couldn't cope. And she'd done it in writing. To the institution. Creating an official record of my alleged instability. 3 days later, she'd sat me down and told me we had a financial emergency. I sat in that parking lot and felt something crack open in my chest. Not sadness. Not even anger. Just cold, clear realization. They didn't just take my money. They took my story. And they rewrote it with my name on documents I never saw. Over the following weeks, I pieced together everything. My father's embezzlement, $865,000 taken over 2 years through fabricated vendor invoices, inflated consulting contracts, and duplicate payment chains. The internal audit had begun in December 2018. Administrative leave in January 2019. Settlement finalized September 2019. Education fund withdrawal, $127,000. February 14, 2019. Used for legal fees and the initial restitution payment. My salary, first year, $52,000. All of it funneled into household expenses while my parents made their monthly restitution payments. Total I unknowingly contributed to covering my father's crime, $179,000. But the money wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was that my mother had looked an associate dean in the eye, in writing, with institutional authority, and told her I was mentally unstable. That I was experiencing anxiety and stress adaptation issues. That I needed mental health support. She had created a record. An official story. One that followed me after I left. Sophie had heard it. Grant had heard it. How many others had my mother quietly told that I'd burned out, that I couldn't handle the pressure, that I was sensitive and fragile and needed to be supported? She had turned my sacrifice into my failure. My trust into my weakness. The party was scheduled for October 19th at the Rainer Hotel. My mother contributed $8,500, which meant she got to control the planning. 80 to 100 guests, past hors d'oeuvres, a string quartet, toasts at 7:30. What she didn't know was that Evan had contacted the venue 2 weeks before. We'd like to set up a photo slideshow during the toasts, he told the event coordinator. Candid pictures from our relationship. Something warm for the guests. The coordinator loved it. Photo slideshows were standard at engagement parties. Romantic, touching, expected. The hotel set up a 120-inch screen and projector system. My mother approved it enthusiastically. She probably imagined watching us laughing on vacation, all the pretty moments she could display. Evan tested the connection twice. The tablet synced seamlessly. No photos would appear. Only documents. 3 weeks before the party, Evan met with Grant. Coffee and she'd done it so carefully, so politely, through official channels, over quiet conversations, in careful language, that even I had started to believe it. I wasn't going back to medical school. I was 30 by 2022. An M2 dropout from 2019 couldn't simply slide back into clinical rotations. But I wasn't done with healthcare. In March 2023, I was promoted to Senior Clinical Research Manager at the oncology biotech where I'd been working. $96,000 a year. Leading a team. Managing patient access programs. Work that actually mattered. It wasn't the MD path. But it was mine. Built on my terms. I cut contact with my parents down to roughly 20%. Holiday cards, brief calls when unavoidable. No more Sunday dinners. No more performances. In August 2024, I attended a healthcare compliance conference at the Philadelphia Convention Center. There was a panel on medical education ethics and institutional boundaries. I went mostly out of curiosity. The second speaker was Evan Whitaker, 34. Healthcare compliance attorney at a mid-size firm in Center City. He specialized in institutional fraud, medical schools, hospitals, research facilities. He talked about cases where families misrepresented students to institutions, where pressure and manipulation created false records, where people got trapped in narratives they didn't write. I listened to him speak and thought, he would understand. After the panel, I introduced myself. We talked for 20 minutes about compliance frameworks and medical education policy. He was smart, precise, careful with language. He asked good questions. At the end, he handed me his card. If you ever need someone to talk to about institutional issues, I'm around. I called him 2 days later. Our first date was in September. Dinner in the city. I told him I'd left medical school. He asked why. And for the first time in 5 years, I told someone the truth. Not the version my mother had crafted. The actual truth. He didn't say I'm sorry that happened. He said, what your mother did, misrepresenting your mental state to an institution, that could constitute fraud. Especially if it was used to manipulate you into withdrawing. By our 4th date in October, I'd shown him everything. The email from my mother to Penn. The education fund withdrawal records. The settlement documents I'd managed to locate. He read through all of it in his apartment, yellow legal pad in hand, making notes like he was preparing for trial. Do you want to do something about this? He asked. I want people to know the truth. I want her to stop being able to tell that story about me. He looked up. Then we'll make sure she can't. He proposed in July 2025. Morris Arboretum, early morning before the crowds arrived. Simple ring. My choice. When he asked, I said yes, because he saw me. Not the version my parents had invented. Not the girl who couldn't handle pressure. Me. I love the real you, he said. Not the version anyone tried to write. I didn't know how much I needed to hear that. When my mother insisted on hosting our engagement party, Evan looked at me. Your call. Part of me wanted to keep her away entirely. But another part, the part that had spent 6 years being misrepresented, wanted one last opportunity for truth. Let's do it, I said. But on our terms. Wayne. Evan laid out what my parents had done, the embezzlement, the education fund, the email to Penn creating a false record of my mental instability. Grant's hands shook as he read my mother's email to Associate Dean Patterson. I married a version of you she invented, he said quietly. I owe you the truth. Evan asked if Grant would be willing to stand up at the party if the moment called for it. Grant agreed. He'd be at the party, at table 7, toward the back. My mother wouldn't know until the moment he rose. October 19th arrived. The hotel ballroom was exactly what you'd expect. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, flower arrangements that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. 86 guests arrived between 6:30 and 7. Friends, extended family, business associates, people from the club. My mother wore Armani and smiled like she'd won something. I wore navy blue, simple, professional, elegant. Evan wore charcoal. We stood near the bar, greeting people, playing our parts. At 7:30, the string quartet finished their set. Time for toasts. The coordinator handed the microphone to my father first, as planned. He started to speak. Something about pride, family, tradition. But my mother took the microphone from his hand. "I'd like to say a few words about Claire," she said. Her voice was warm, practiced, lethal. She talked about my childhood, my sensitive nature, how I'd always been someone who needed guidance. The room smiled politely, waiting for the pivot toward celebration. Then she went for the throat. Medical school at Penn was too much pressure for Claire. She dropped out in her second year. She couldn't keep up with the demands. A sympathetic smile. And her first marriage, well, some people just aren't ready for that kind of commitment. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Uncomfortable glances. My college friend Emily's eyes went wide across the room. I stood very still. My father started to add something, probably another carefully constructed narrative about how they'd supported me through difficult times. But Evan stood up first. He had a leather portfolio in his hand. "Mrs. Clatterbuck, before you keep going, would you like to tell everyone why you really pulled Claire out of medical school? Or should I do it for you?" My mother's champagne glass slipped from her fingers. Crystal shattered on marble. 86 people stopped breathing. Evan walked toward the screen. The venue coordinator, who'd been standing by with the slideshow remote, handed it over without question. This was the moment the romantic photos were supposed to begin. The screen lit up. Not with pictures of us laughing on a beach. With an email. From Diane Clatterbuck to Associate Dean Patterson, Perelman School of Medicine. Date: January 12, 2019. Subject: Confidential, Claire Clatterbuck medical leave request. Evan didn't read the whole thing aloud. He didn't have to. The key phrases were highlighted in yellow. Claire has been experiencing significant anxiety and stress adaptation issues. Our family is seeking appropriate mental health support for her. We respectfully request accommodation for voluntary medical leave. 86 people read it in real time. Someone gasped. My mother's sister, Aunt Patricia, whispered, "Diane, what is this?" My mother tried to speak. "That's taken out of." "Let me provide context," Evan said. His tone was courtroom precise. This email was sent 3 days before Claire signed her medical leave form. Claire was never shown this email. She did not request mental health support. She didn't know her mother had told Penn she was experiencing stress adaptation issues. He pressed the remote. The next document appeared. Bank withdrawal record. February 14, 2019. $127,000. Clatterbuck Education Fund, 529 account. Destination: Clatterbuck Family Trust. Legal expenses. Claire's education fund, Evan said. Withdrawn without her knowledge. Not for a family health emergency, as she was told. For legal expenses. People were leaning forward, reading the screen, doing the math in their heads. Evan pressed the remote again. Employment separation agreement. Lawrence Clatterbuck / Penridge Therapeutics. September 2019. Certain details were redacted. Evan had been careful about what needed protecting, but one line stood alone in stark clarity. Restitution: $865,000 over 36 months, in resolution of financial misconduct. Not severance. Restitution. Financial misconduct. My father's face went crimson. This is a private matter. Is it? Evan's voice remained perfectly steady. Because your wife just publicly called your daughter a medical school dropout who couldn't handle the pressure. She made it sound like Claire failed. So let me be clear about what actually happened. He turned to face the room. Claire didn't drop out. She was pulled out. In January 2019, Mr. Clatterbuck was under investigation for embezzling $865,000 from his employer. His wife told Claire there was a family financial emergency. She asked Claire to take medical leave and begin working to help support the household. And then she sent this email to Penn. He gestured to the screen, creating an official record that Claire was mentally unstable. My mother tried to interrupt. I was protecting. You were protecting your husband, Evan said. And yourselves. Claire's education fund paid for legal fees. Her salary helped cover restitution payments. And you rewrote her story so thoroughly that even she started to believe it. He paused. I'm not finished. The room held its breath. Mrs. Clatterbuck also told Claire's first husband, before they married, that Claire had experienced a breakdown at medical school. That she was fragile. That she needed someone stable to manage her. Movement from across the room. Grant Hollowell stood up from table 7. My mother's head whipped around. Her face went pale. What is he doing here? Grant's voice was quiet, but clear. She told me the same thing, Claire. That you'd had a breakdown. That you couldn't handle the pressure. That I needed to be patient with you because you didn't always recognize your own limits. He looked at my mother directly. I believed you. I'm sorry, Claire. I should have questioned it. The room was spinning now. Whispers and conversations, people looking from my mother to my father to me to the screen. I stood up. My voice, when I spoke, was steady. I was in the top 25% of my class, Mom. First year GPA, 3.76. I wasn't struggling. I wasn't failing. You pulled me out to pay for Dad's mistakes. You took my education fund. You told Penn I was mentally unstable. You told my husband I'd had a breakdown. And then you spent 6 years telling everyone I was too fragile to finish medical school. I looked around the room. All 86 people. Every face. I didn't fail, I said. You did. The room was silent, except for the sound of my mother's heels on the marble as she walked out. My father followed. 63 guests left with him or shortly after, some uncomfortable, some out of loyalty, some simply not knowing what to do. 23 stayed. Emily was the first to approach me. Your mom told everyone you'd had a nervous breakdown years ago. I believed her, Claire. I'm so sorry. 12 people said some version of that. I never knew. I should have asked you directly. Aunt Patricia called the next morning. I always thought something was off about your mother's version. Diane is very good at controlling narratives. Too good. Over the next 2 days, I received 14 text messages from extended family asking for the full story. I sent everyone the same response. What Evan showed at the party is the truth. That's all I have to say. My father sent an email on October 21st. Subject: disappointed. Body: we did what we thought was best for the family in a difficult time. Your public humiliation of us was unnecessary and cruel. You're being dramatic. I deleted it without responding. My mother sent nothing. Some people asked whether I felt guilty for publicly humiliating my parents. I didn't. They had humiliated me privately for 6 years. They had told friends, extended family, my husband, and my medical school that I was unstable, fragile, unable to cope. They had constructed an entire narrative around my failure, a failure that never happened. I simply gave them a taste of sunlight. Evan and I decided to elope. Small ceremony. February 14, 2026. 8 people. Emily, Sophie, my old anatomy lab partner, Evan's parents and sister, Aunt Patricia, and 2 of Evan's closest friends. Not my parents. Not my father's business associates. Not the people from the club. just the ones who saw us clearly. On December 1st, 2025, I was promoted again, Director of Patient Access Programs at the biotech. $118,000 a year. Managing a team of 6. Building advocacy programs for underserved patients. People who got left behind by systems that were supposed to help them. I understood them. In January 2026, I enrolled in an MPH program at Drexel University. Part-time. Public Health Policy and Management. This time, no one could pull me out. Grant sent an email in early November. 3 paragraphs. Genuine. I should have questioned what they told me. I should have asked you directly. I'm sorry I married a version of you they invented instead of finding out who you really were. I wrote back, thank you. Some apologies don't fix things. But they acknowledge that the break was real. I started therapy in November 2025. Not because I was unstable. Because I was finally stable enough to process what had been done to me. My therapist asked once, when did you start believing your mother's version of you? The day I signed that form, I said. I don't have much contact with my parents now. Holiday cards. That's it. My father tried a few more emails. Family is family. We should talk. This has gone on long enough. I stopped responding. Some people don't want reconciliation. They want compliance. On February 14, 2026, Evan and I were married at Morris Arboretum. 8 guests. Outdoor ceremony. Simple vows. When it was Evan's turn, he looked at me and said, I promise to always see the real you. Not the version anyone else wrote. Not the story they tried to tell about you. Just you. For the first time in 6 years, I believed someone actually did. Here's what I want you to understand. Some families don't destroy you with screaming. They do it with paperwork. With polished lies. With stories told quietly to deans and husbands and friends and communities. They rewrite your history so carefully, so officially, that even you begin to believe it. The truth doesn't always arrive quickly. It took me 3 years from the moment I saw that tax document to the night I stood in front of 86 people and reclaimed my story. But when the truth comes, it does something important. It gives your wounds back their real names. I wasn't weak. I was betrayed. I wasn't fragile. I was lied about. I didn't fail. I was sabotaged. Those are different things. And the difference matters more than I can tell you. I didn't get my MD, but I got something more important. I got my life back. And the right to tell my own story. If you're listening to this and someone has rewritten your narrative, told people you were something you weren't, created records that painted you as less than you were, used their authority to make their version of you more believable than the truth, I want you to know something. You're not crazy. You know what happened to you. And someday, when you're ready, you'll tell it. That's my story. The real one. The one I'm writing now.